brought to you by Charity Mobile, the phone company that supports life and family. 5% of your monthly plan price goes to your favorite charity. Buy the way you believe at CharityMobile.com and use promo code TRADITION. This video is a repurposed clip from yesterday's live stream about Bishop Strickland. The clip today is about actually something entirely different, another news story that broke the same time that the Bishop Strickland story did, which is about Luisa Piccarreta. A couple of months ago, her cause for beatification and ultimately canonization was suspended by the Vatican. It didn't make a lot of headway until a diocese in the United States reported on it and then made a ruling. So here is that story for you, and I want people to give me what they think about all of this in the comments, please, whether you are a fan of Luisa Piccarreta or think this was a good move, or maybe you don't like her work but don't like this ruling either. Whatever your take, let me know in the comments, but please discuss this with civility since people in the traditional community are all over the board on this subject. So I'm going to pivot here. I'm going to show you kind of why I started with this. So yesterday I posted this, a poll. You may have seen this. It was ruled. So here's what I said in this poll. I posted on my channel community. It said the dicastery for the doctrine of the faith ruled negatively for Luisa Piccarreta. Do you believe her visions were real or false? 17% of respondents said it was real. 24% said false. 38% said they were not sure, and the others didn't have opinion one way or the other and just wanted to see what other people thought. And I actually had a fair amount of comments. I posted this partially because YouTube is apparently now promoting community posts and things, which is interesting. But you'll notice that either a lot of people don't know or don't believe Luisa Piccarreta's messages were real. And it's into that environment that I show you this. Yesterday, saw this on social media. This is a parish from the Diocese of Colorado Springs. I saw a Catholic, just a normal Catholic Facebook page posted, but I wanted to find something from the actual Diocese of Colorado Springs. And so there's the pastoral letter from Bishop Golka, and thankfully they reproduced it here. And I'm going to read it to you so you can see what we're talking about here. But Bishop Golka has banned the messages of Luisa Piccarreta in his diocese. Now, that might surprise some of you. Might be shocked that his official ruling is to not promulgate them in his diocese. I've seen some people elsewhere on Facebook say they hope people on YouTube will stop promoting them as well. That's the sentiment that I'm seeing. The letter was dated July 15th, so it went out to the diocese a few days ago, but was posted yesterday on social media. So here's the letter from Bishop Golka, so you can see what he's talking about, and then I'll give you some context. Dear brothers and sisters in Christ, I am aware that the writings of the servant of God, Luisa Piccarreta, have been circulating in some parts of the diocese, and some groups have embraced her writings and developed a devotion to her. As your bishop who is responsible for the spiritual well-being of the faithful entrusted to me, I am duty-bound to inform you that due to some theological difficulties in her writings, the dicastery for the causes of the saints has suspended the continuation of her cause for beatification and canonization. The dicastery identified the difficulties in her writings as follows. 1. Theological. The conception of the divine will proposed by the servant of God is too rigid, mechanical, and obsessive, and seems not to leave man the possibility of exercising his free will. I'll pause here because anytime I see in a Vatican document on anything having to do with anything that might touch on orthodoxy, the word rigid, I immediately get a red flag. Let's continue. Second point, Christological. The doctrine of reparation and victim spirituality developed by the servant of God does not integrate the primacy of the merciful, unmerited, and unconditional love of God, and risks canceling or at least relativizing the free and gratuitous offering of the Redeemer. 3. Anthropological. The same spirituality is marked by a deep pessimism about human nature. There is little or no reference to the resurrection of Christ, Christian hope, sanctifying grace, the goodness of creation, and ecclesial communion. Given these serious doctrinal errors in her writings and the suspension of her cause for beatification and canonization, and keeping before my eyes the supreme law of the Church, which is the salvation of souls, I direct that her writings are not to be disseminated in the diocese, and that any groups meeting to study and promote her writings are no longer to do so. I also enthusiastically support the spiritual formation of the faithful in the diocese, and I encourage all to study the spiritual wisdom of the saints that the Church has put forth as exemplary spiritual masters such as St. Teresa of Avila, St. John of the Cross, St. Francis de Sales, St. Therese of Lisieux, and many others who throughout their lives and witness bring us into a deeper communion with Christ and his Church. Sincerely in Christ, signed by the Bishop of Colorado Springs. And yes, if you see a typo in here or something like there's one there, it's because they were hand transcribing this before in their post. But that's it. It does match this. I did read this ahead of time. And you see some people in the comments. This post didn't get a lot of traction. I don't know why. Somebody calling what she was saying Jansenism. Yeah. So that happened just a couple. It went on across social media yesterday. I saw people speaking about this. Figlu says, we must be careful regarding rigidness because the demonic are very much about rules and rigidness. Rigidness is good to an extent. The cross was rigid. The faith was rigid, and doctors of the church said to cling rigidly to the faith. So, Pope Pius XII said that those who talk about the church being too rigid are actually the enemy within. He spoke about that himself. So I'll take my cues from Pius XII on that. I will. WM says this bishop has never read the Book of Heaven. Well, I'm going to show you what this is referencing, because this is a story I didn't report on when it broke because there were other things. I had more immediate things that I was more interested in covering. But here we have this story from LaCroix. This was posted on February 3rd of this year. So this is the context. Yes, the beatification process of Luisa Piccarreta has been suspended. The author of numerous mystical writings, Luisa Piccarreta felt called to spread the message of, quote, the divine will, but whose writings as early as 1938 raised doctrinal problems. Those of you who are devoted to her in some way, who follow her writings, know that she's not exactly not controversial. That her writings, people are very divided about them, and some people get some very strong reactions one way or the other to it. Father Maudsley, for instance, is not exactly the biggest fan of Luisa Piccarreta, to put it mildly, and many of you do take what he says seriously. But I'm going to give you here the actual. This is really short, and we'll talk about this. So, say the file is suspended. The Catholic Church will not beatify Luisa Piccarreta, an Italian mystic known for her spiritual exercises centered on union with the will of God. On the 24th of January, Bishop Benoit Bertrand de Mende, president of the French Bishops' Episcopal Doctrinal Commission, shared a message from the Dicastery for the Causes of Saints addressed to the bishops of France. The message conveyed the decision to halt the examination of the case of Luisa Piccarreta, initiated in 1994 by the now deceased Italian Archbishop Giovanni Battista Picchetti of Trani. Why does the Church approach this Italian mystic who has been gaining interest among priests and lay people in recent years? Bishop Bertrand repeats the arguments put forward by the dicastery, which are of three kinds: theological, Christological, and anthropological. Piccarreta's conception of the divine will, quote, does not leave man the possibility to exercise his free will. It does not incorporate, quote, the primacy of God's merciful and unconditional love. And finally, there is, quote, little or no mention of the resurrection of Christ, Christian hope, and ecclesial communion. Bishop Bertrand therefore advises caution regarding the dissemination of Piccarreta's message, echoing the warning of Cardinal Marcello Semeraro, prefect for the Dicastery for the Cause of the Saints, who had asked him in an April 18, 2022 letter, quote, to accordingly evaluate the popular dissemination of such elements to avoid confusion among believers. So that's why. Then they give some background on her and the cause. That happened, and there's a bigger context to this. And I think I'm going to talk about this tomorrow, unless bigger news breaks today. And while that's like the dicastery for the causes of the saints, looming over this were changes made by Cardinal Fernandez to apparitions and how they're approved, and now they're just flooding us with approved, or well, not approved, but nihil obstats for certain apparitions and outright rejection of others. Remember, the Vatican now is no longer the business of approving miracles, which also would include then the visions of saints and would-be saints and such. And instead is now saying, well, you can read these freely or not, and that's it. That's all they say. One wonders what this is going to do for the actual cause of canonizing saints. And a lot of the things they're approving now are pretty weird. Some of the ones they're disapproving of are pretty weird too. But the standards now are just odd, and they're flooding us with these things. And this happened before those new standards. But it's one wonder if it's because of the content of some of the messages there about like the crisis in the church and things, because I've seen some of that stuff from her. If that's not what is at play here, because there's no mention of ecclesial communion in there. That's actually one of the big standards they now have for approval of apparitions and mystics and things. Whether, like, remember, they told us with a straight face that if an apparition does anything to cause scandal among the laity that causes them to doubt communion with the Holy See, they weren't going to approve of it, which means Our Lady of Good Success, as most people know her by. Her real name is Our Lady of the Good Event of the Purification, if you want an accurate translation of her Spanish language title. That one would never have been approved. Neither would have Our Lady of Akita. Probably Fatima wouldn't have either, nor La Salette. And so I wonder. I don't personally trust most of the things coming out of Rome, but then again, I have seen enough of the Luisa Piccarretta's message. I kept a bit of a distance to it until the Vatican made a good ruling. And they made a ruling. I don't know if it's a good one, though. Catholic Arrow says the modernists are terrified of Marian apparitions. Yeah. Yes, they are. Our Lady of Quito and La Salette were both hidden for a time. They were kept from the public for some time. La Salette for quite a bit of time, actually. WM says St. Augustine believed we had multiple souls guiding each part of our body. That is more radical than anything in the Book of Heaven. Interesting. Could you email me a link to some of that? Because that's interesting. I'd love to see what that and some commentary from other saints on what he's talking about there. Una Martin says, and I have to be careful reading this one, Luisa Piccarretta's writings are graphic. Father Maudsley is correct. He read her writings, and I'm in agreement. I could not read them. They were not from God. And I keep hearing that from people, and it's one of the reasons I kept thinking. Although some would say, in response to that, that there were other saints who used a very intimate language when describing their experiences communing with Christ in that mystical way that most of us never experience. And they used we'll call it marital kind of language, but nothing as graphic as would come to mind when I say that today. But they get compared to some of the doctors of the church who has some of that kind of thing. And I'm wondering if there's any veracity to that comparison or not. Again, I'm just here to tell you the news on it. Yes, Harmony, we made it home day before yesterday. That's why I live streamed yesterday from here. Still exhausted from that trip, though. Slept right through my alarm this morning. But yes, we were very happy that we made it home. My kids were happy too, actually. When we had to take our son to one of his normal appointments yesterday in the car, he did not want to go. He thought we were going on another long drive. All right, folks. If there's any final thoughts in the comments here, please get them to me. I may clip this video tomorrow the Luisa Piccarretta stuff, because it's something that needs to be out there. People need to see this. So I think I may do that. But otherwise, let me know what you think about all this in the comments. If you think the critiques of Luisa Piccarretta are on the money or wrong, and that people should give them a chance, and people are interpreting things wrong. Whatever you think, let me know in the comments. Just do so with charity. People tend to be, and with respect to one another, people tend to get very energized by Luisa Piccarretta one way or the other, and for similar figures as well. So please try to remember to do so with mutual respect. All right, folks. Thanks very much for tuning in today. As always, pray for the church. I'm Anthony Stine. Ave Maria.